Welcome back to Normal Island. I'm Curtis Daly, and I'm joined by Ben McLean. Ben, how are you this evening?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm a bit exhausted, but I'm functioning, and I'm very glad to be with you because yeah, it's been a while since it feels like it's been a while since we've done a show together.
I think it has actually. Yeah, I've missed you a lot. Although I've enjoyed your banterings on GB News. When I
Oh
say
yes,
banterings, I mean destroying the opposition.
that's very generous for what happens on TV news. I'm trying my best on there. Let's say, yeah,
Well, you're doing the good fight though. Much appreciated. But this is what we've got coming up for you tonight. Reform want to deport 600,000 people in 5 years. Matt Kennard exposes Stella Creasy, and Israel slaughters 5 journalists in hospital bombing. As always, remember to like the stream, and if you're not a subscriber, then please hit that button. We'll, of course, be getting to your comments at the end, so make sure you're busy in the chat. But on to our first story. Reform have announced their radical proposal to deport 600,000 people in 5 years.
I'm not standing here telling you all of this is easy, all of this is straightforward. And we had, of course, with the Windrush row, we had a situation there where people who'd come 50, 60, in fact, nearly 70 years ago had faulty paperwork. So there is an exercise of common sense that has to come in here. But do we realistically think, Zia, we can deport 600,000 people in the lifetime of the first Parliament?
Totally, yeah. So look, one of the key points to make here is if you look at the population who are illegally, and by the way, this is difficult because you're trying to count the uncountable almost by definition. You're talking north of 650,000 adults without children who are in this country illegally.
I find it very ironic that Farage is standing on a podium with the slogan Operation Restoring Justice, talking about deporting 600,000 people, where those are fleeing conflicts. Some, have fled areas and countries where we've had a direct hand in causing. Now, these are the specifics as follows. It would make £2 billion available to offer payments or aid to countries like Afghanistan to take back migrants, with sanctions potentially imposed on uncooperative countries. Under the plan, people will be arrested on arrival, detained at disused RAF bases, and, if agreements were reached, returned to their countries of origin, including Afghanistan and Eritrea, where a significant number of people on small boats come from. The party says it would build removal centres in remote areas of the country under plans to detain up to 24,000 people within 18 months. Now, these plans would currently be illegal, especially after Farage said he would work with the Taliban to send people back. To circumvent the law, Reform want to leave international treaties. The bill would also disapply international treaties like the Refugee Convention, a 1951 treaty that prevents signatory countries like the UK from returning refugees to countries where they face serious threats to their life or freedom. To make removals easier, Reform is promising to leave the European Convention on Human Rights, the ECHR, another treaty designed to protect human rights and political freedoms. That's right, Reform will happily send people fleeing persecution back to the country of origin where they will likely face death. What has the government said in response? The proposals could face legal challenges and political opposition, with Labour branding it unworkable and the Conservatives accusing Reform UK of recycling their ideas. Labour Party chairwoman Ellie Reeves criticised the lack of detail in a 6-page plan, which Youssef said 4 months ago would be a comprehensive strategy with a full policy document, including a year-by-year timeline and clear targets. So that's the government claiming it's unworkable and lacks detail. Not that this is a monstrous policy that will literally see people end up dead. Ben, before we discuss the ethics of this policy, are Reform lying when they say they claim they can deport 600,000 people in 5 years?
yeah, they are absolutely lying. It's and the point isn't the deportations, right? There's going to be a mix of people within the Reform establishment and the followers who understand, and some who like don't understand. The ones who like understand what's going on know that there's no way that they're going to be able to do this. So you've got to look at the practicality of it. You're talking about deporting like 700 people per day from day one. Now, that's if you did it from day one, but according to the Institute for Government, withdrawal from the ECHR and the Refugee Convention would require, I think it's 6 months for the ECHR and 12 months for the Refugee Convention of notice that they have to give. So that's immediately 1 year of their term gone. So it's more than 700 people they would have to deport daily in order to hit that target. The state simply doesn't have the power to do this. It doesn't have the like infrastructure to do this. So you'd be looking at a massive expansion of state power. You're looking at like Big Brother in your living room, because ultimately that's what it would be. We've seen in the US like people getting swept up in ICE raids and innocent people getting carted off to El Salvador. Like, and this is the same thing. It's just more competent. I honestly think this is more worrying than Trump in a lot of ways, because you're going to see your rights being stripped away from you along these lines. But in terms of the practicality of it, the practicality isn't really the point, right? It's not about deporting 650,000 migrants. Like, Farage doesn't care about that. Zia Youssef doesn't care about that. What it is it's a means to get into power, so that they can help out their billionaire friends. That's what they care about. And so that they can restructure our human rights so it's more in line with, giving them and their government more power. And I get that reform officials might not intend state overreach. Like, that might not be the intention of a lot of the people involved in this. But once they have power, and this is something we see again and again with authoritarian regimes, once they have power, and once they have, no need to follow the Convention on Torture, for example, then it will just be too tempting to start pushing at the boundaries of what has been acceptable in Western democracy in the past 20 years. Like, so I guess the answer to your question is yes, they're lying, but by the time people cotton on, it's going to be far too late. It's not really the point, right?
Yeah, no, I understand. Obviously, you're drawing comparisons to the US, which is absolutely clear. I'm interested, though, in what you're saying about how this isn't as bad as Trump. Or you think this could go further?
I think it's worse.
Yeah, you think it's worse. Can
you
explain?
It's simply the fact that Nigel Farage is a more competent political operator than Trump. The guy who's the face of this and the personality of this is far more competent. And that, so potentially far more dangerous. It depends how this all goes, really. I'm not saying necessarily that Farage is going to be worse than Trump, because of course the US has a lot of, for one thing, the US has a lot of firearms in its borders, which we don't have to worry about. We don't have to worry about literal armed militias going about at this stage. So that's something to bear in mind. But it's part of the, like, Farage realized he's realized that because of the principle of refoulement, the idea that you can't repatriate people if they're going to be tortured, you're going to have to leave not just the ECHR but also suspend the Refugee Convention, I think for 5 years, he said, and withdraw from the Convention on Torture. And this is, in practical terms, what he would need to do to be able to deport people who are at risk of torture. And just purely talking in practicality for a moment, the ECHR blocks about 2 cases per year with what are called Rule 39 interim rulings. Like, that's how the ECHR will block deportations when it does. But on average, it's blocking 2 per year. Bear in mind, in 2022, we had 74,000 small boat arrivals. 74,000 asylum applications, 74,000 asylum applications in the year 2022 alone. And Nigel Farage wants us to withdraw from the ECHR to deport an extra 2 people? I don't think so. I think there's more to it than that. He wants to withdraw from the ECHR because he doesn't believe in human rights. He doesn't believe in liberal democracy. He wants a more fascist-leaning government. Like, that's where Nigel Farage is going, and it's kind of difficult to avoid that conclusion when you start looking at what the ECHR does, and blocking those extra 2 people a year, I don't think that's wise in it.
Yeah, and I think I kind of agree in a sense when it comes to your comparisons with Trump, is that Farage is to me far more ideological and more driven, because it's the same kind of politics he's always supported, given when he was younger his radical far right leanings. Whereas Donald Trump was, he was born in New York. At one point he was seen as a sort of liberal celebrity. Again, we can't really trust what he says, right? But he's been on TV saying, I'm a Democrat. He supported universal healthcare at one point. And really, it was kind of a grift to support the Republican Party. And it doesn't mean he's not right-wing, because, of course, what he's doing in government is absolutely fascistic. But I think with Trump, it's more about, he cares more about power than in the ideological sort of bent of fascism. The people around him are different. Whereas Farage has been consistent in his politics. And I do think he'd be more competent at being right-wing.
Yes, and it leads to moral issues that the left, but also the media should be calling this out. Like, I'm going to have to issue a trigger warning for what I'm going to say next, because it is pretty horrible. But when we talk about refoulement, when we talk about the idea of deporting victims of dangerous regimes back to where they came from to be tortured and brutalized, I think it's worth putting those arguments in context. So, for example, the Taliban typically carry out interrogations at night time so that prisoners are sleep deprived. There are a couple of examples I want to draw on. Farishta was accused without evidence of working for the Afghan Freedom Front and imprisoned with her young boy. I think he was about 7. She was separated from him, so she didn't know where he was. And then her toes were electrocuted to the point that she lost consciousness, right? There was Hamidullah, who was accused of being involved in protests. So the Taliban beat him and tied weights to his private parts, forcing him to stand for hours and beating him with sticks if the weights fell, right? Bear in mind, this is all happening at like 2 a.m. And then there was Syed Jamal, who was accused of working for the AFF again. And he was actually a former police officer who'd worked with the UK-backed government in 2020. So I'd say we owe him something. And the Taliban pulled out his toenails with pliers without any form of a trial to determine his guilt, because they accused him of being part of the AFF. And Nigel Farage says to Farishta, says to Hamidullah, says to Syed Jamal, you're going back to where you came from. Says, no, we're going to send you back. We're going to take you back and put you in the arms of the Taliban. Not just that, but we're going to pay the Taliban to do it, right? He's made £2 billion of funds available so that he gets to pay the Taliban to take back people like the people I've just named. The victims who've had their toenails ripped out. And he wants to pay the Taliban to take them back. I honestly think that it's past time that we started calling this shit what it is. If it was Jeremy Corbyn, it would have been done like months ago. It would have been headlines. Would have been Jeremy Corbyn, Taliban sympathizer. I think it's time we start doing the same to Farage. It's time we start saying, if you support giving the Taliban back their victims whose toenails they rip out, you are a Taliban sympathizer. You are the scum of the earth. And I think Farage is the scum of the earth. Like, I think that anybody who supports Nigel Farage at this point and supports what he's doing, in particularly in relation to this, is a Taliban sympathizer. And I think we should say it is fundamentally like un-British, let alone anything else. Like, make the appeal to the British values. It's fundamentally un-British to pay the Taliban to take back their victims so that they can further torture, mutilate, and execute them. Our global reputation and soft power is already like destroyed with what's going on with Israel, and at the point that Farage takes over, we're going to become like a second-rate banana republic in league with the Taliban. Like, I just think it's insane. Oh yeah, there was another element of unworkability I wanted to mention. Sorry, I didn't organize my thoughts very well on this. But apparently, one of the schemes that Reform are planning to use is to pay £2,500 to migrants who arrive on our shores and then agree to cooperate and agree to leave. They really haven't thought this one through, because that will incentivize people to land on the shores in the hopes of getting £2,500 to return back. Like, it's just they haven't like thought this through. And of course, it'll also incentivize smugglers to get involved in that, because any time that you're moving money in that area, you're going to start incentivizing smuggling gangs as well. It's badly thought through. It is impractical, and it is immoral.
I think you're absolutely right when you say, had this been something from Jeremy Corbyn, the entire media would say he's an Afghan or Taliban sympathizer. They would. And it just shows how bad the media are holding right-wing people to account and holding reform to account. They are hopeless at it. And it just shows like that no one's really gone through the detail. No one's taken to task Nigel Farage. I mean, this policy is utterly immoral. The descriptions you've just let out there, which were really hard to hear, by the way, these are the kind of scenarios that we're going to create. We're going to send people back to this. We're going to kill people by doing this. And he wants to pull us out of the Refugee Convention and the ECHL, which means our rights will also be stripped too, just so he can basically treat refugees like dirt. It's like the point of it is to be immoral at the end of the day. And also, again, aside from all the impracticalities as well, which is why I think this is just chasing votes, right? You're not going to get rid of 600,000 people in 5 years. That cannot work. So, I suppose my final question to you then is, because I expect that Nigel Farage is going to win. Let's say he wins, right? And he tries to enact this policy, and it ultimately fails, by the way. Do you think that we're going to see another drive to the right? Because people are going to be like, you know what, even Nigel Farage, we can't trust him. And this is where you have parties like Advance, Restore Britain, are going to gain traction from reform's failures.
That's a real danger. Part of it rests on how well we can whip the Liberals and the left into shape. Because, I'm sorry, but both Liberals and the left need to be doing better at calling this shit out. Yeah. Like, it's really bad. We're in dangerous territory right now. I think that Tony Benn was correct when he said that how governments treat refugees is instructive, because it's how they would treat the rest of us if they thought they could get away with it. And Nigel Farage is moving us closer to a world where that is how we get treated. It's really dangerous.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's true. That is how the working class will be treated if they could get away with it. And it's our job to make that connection to people, to say, I mean, you wish you could win on just the moral argument, but sometimes you have to make the material argument, which is that you could be treated like this too. So if you just want to be selfish, right, don't side with these people. But I very much agree with saying very powerful words you had there. But we are going to move on to our next story because time is getting on. Journalist Matt Kennard exposed Labour's... Start that one again, sorry. Journalist Matt Kennard exposed Labour's Stella Creasy's links to Labour friends of Israel, despite claiming this wasn't true. It started with Stella Creasy condemning Israel's attack on Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis. The Foreign Secretary is right to condemn the attack, and it must be seen as more than a reminder of the urgency of a ceasefire with clear evidence of a double assault. The international community must now demand the ICC be able to investigate as a war crime and do so. I mean, I always find it odd seeing a Labour MP say this when they've been, Stella, for example, has been broadly supportive of the government. It's performative, prompting Kennard to call her out. When are you going to resign from Labour Friends of Israel? It's a front group for the Israeli embassy in London. Walthamstow deserves better, much better. And she responds with, for what it's worth, I've never been a member of the Labour Friends of Israel, just as never been a member of the Labour Friends of Palestine. As ever, Matt Kennard, your fact-checking is remiss to say the least. But given you never asked before publishing, I guess not your concern. And he then says, I didn't say you were a member. You are a parliamentary supporter. When will you resign? Again, Walthamstow deserves better, with a screenshot from the LFI website showing she is indeed a supporter. Awkward. So Creasy would have you believe she has nothing to do with LFI. She isn't partisan or biased, despite voting to prescribe Palestine action. She, of course, isn't biased towards Israel. Well, she continued to try and wangle her way out with little success. I genuinely have no idea what that means or where it's from, but it's factually untrue that I've ever been a member of either organisation. If you're criticising me for speaking up for a Walthamstow constituent whose parents were kidnapped by Hamas, then I absolutely did. Labour Friends of Israel is not a membership organisation. MPs and Lords become parliamentary supporters if they support apartheid and genocide. Is Stella Creasy now claiming she was signed up as an LFI parliamentary supporter without her consent? Walthamstow MP Stella Creasy was very chatty earlier, but went silent when asked question below. We have to assume the lack of clarity means Labour Friends of Israel is not lying when they say she is a parliamentary supporter of the group. Walthamstow deserves better than this. Well, the editor of Tribune magazine shared some very useful and embarrassing information about Creasy. Not only does Labour Friends of Israel list Stella Creasy as a supporter, her long-term partner Dan Fox is its former director. Supporting a genocidal lobby group is shameful enough. Supporting it and then lying about it is even worse. I mean, I think it's pretty shameful to insinuate people are bad journalists when it's on record that Creasy has connections to LFI and is listed as a parliamentary supporter. Ben, these Labour MPs not only have voted to support Israel, but the way they act and try and excuse it is just shameful.
Yeah, I seem to recall back in 2020 there was a sprightly young leadership candidate, the son of a toolmaker no less, who was running to be Labour leader. Basically, sold himself as Jeremy Corbyn in a suit, and I remember him pledging to me that he would put human rights at the heart of his foreign policy, and he and all of the people who followed him seem to have forgotten that. That seems to have completely gone out the window. That's completely disconnected from anything we now hear from them, particularly to do with Palestine. But to be fair, to do with human rights around the world, they're not particularly good on human rights anywhere. Even in the UK, they're talking about following Nigel Farage now, along the lines of like suspending the refugee convention and things like that. Stella Creasy seems to have not been being fully upfront, to put it kindly, about her LFI connections. But of course, she's one part of a much larger problem. You know, she is the mouldy slice of bread, but you have to understand that the mold runs all the way through the bread, even if you can't see it. This party is rotten to the core. These are like the dying throes of the Labour Party. And interestingly, my mother, who I was talking to earlier today, has been has been part of the Labour Party, whether a supporter or an actual member, for the last 50 years. And she said that she's now thinking of joining Jeremy Corbyn's Your Party. Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana, I should say, is Your Party right now, which I think says a lot. I think there's a lot of people now who are looking at how Labour are being caught out again and again and again, just like violating their principles again and again and again. And they're thinking, I don't actually want anything to do with this. We really need political parties that reflect our principles and that we actually want to vote for. It's not enough to go, well, I'm not Nigel Farage, because when you're just imitating Nigel Farage, when you're just copying Nigel Farage, I said on GB News, we've ended up in this ridiculous situation where we've got three versions of Reform running against each other. We've got the Reform Party, we've got the Conservative Party run by Kemi Badenoch that copies Reform, and we've got the Labour Party that copies Reform. Like every single party, every single one of those three parties is copying Reform down to the letter. And it's getting really tiresome for people looking at voting for them. And when it comes to Israel and Palestine and LFI, support for LFI, it just underlines the point. It's not the only thing that underlines that point, but it just underlines the point that this is a dead and dying party.
I think it's interesting what you're saying about your mum signing up to Your Party, because we actually had a comment on one of our videos, it was today actually, that said Me and my mum weren't big Jeremy Corbyn supporters. In fact, we really didn't like him, and my mum's a bit more of a New Labour figure. But the way Keir Starmer has acted, we've both signed up to your party, or this new party. So this is two people who said they had, like, a fact, I think they said Jeremy Corbyn's a creep. I mean, I don't know how he comes to that realisation, but two people said they really didn't like Jeremy Corbyn. And now the way Starmer has acted as supposed Labour leader, he's pushed them left, which for me, I think that sounds fantastic. But that just shows how Keir Starmer and the sort of Morgan McSweeney project, shall we say, policies and morals aside, as political operators, they're terrible. They're terrible. The polls show, even without the inclusion of your party, that they're doing really badly. 20%, 18%. I'm just thinking of James O'Brien saying any other leader would be 20 points ahead. And what Helena said on Navarra Live was funny. She's like, any leader that can just get to 20% would be quite nice. And this is all, self-inflicted.
Yeah, it's self-inflicted. But I think this is what happens if you start prioritizing corporate donors over the rank and file members of your party. And it looks like the Labour Party are going to go the way of the Whigs. It looks like they might well go from being one of the largest parties in Parliament to being virtually irrelevant within a few short years. And the Labour Party can either realise this, or they can sort of get as much of the grain from the stores in the bottom of the ship before they all abandon it like rats leaving a sinking ship. I think many of them have chosen to do the latter.
Well, they did say, one source said, they were shaking off the fleas, and now it's rats sinking the ship, or leaving the sinking ship, that is. I agree. We're seeing seismic shifts within political parties, of course, with reform. And even though Labour won a seismic majority on a very small sort of vote share, 33%, which is pretty low to get over 400 seats, right? Could be political irrelevance, which I cannot wait for. I think a lot of people also feel the same.
Well earned.
Well earned, yes. Let's move on. But before we go on to our final story, I just want to say, remember, please like the stream. And if you're not a subscriber, then please hit that button. If you want us to grow, then you can head over to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. There is a link to our Patreon where you can support us monthly, or follow the other link to give us a one-time contribution. Alternatively, you could become a YouTube member for just 99p. But anyway, on to our final story of the evening. Israel has slaughtered 5 journalists as it bombs the Nasser hospital in Khan Yunis twice. Israel bombs the main hospital in southern Gaza on Monday and then struck the same spot again as rescuers and journalists rushed to help the wounded, killing at least 20 people, including 5 journalists, health officials said. The first strike hit the top floor of a building at the Nasser hospital, killing the Reuters journalist Hassam al-Masri and others. Journalists and rescuers then rushed to the scene to help the wounded when a second bomb struck the same spot 15 minutes later. Now, we have footage of the attack, but warning, this footage may be distressing.
An Israeli strike on Nasser Hospital in Gaza drew a rush of journalists and first responders sifting through the wreckage for survivors and the remains of those killed. Among the dead, cameraman Hussam al-Masri, a contractor who worked for Reuters. He was up on an external stairwell, providing this live feed showing smoke rising from fighting elsewhere when the strike hit. A responder holds up a camera and a live view broadcast unit used to transmit live video, while others gather up a body. The man in the red t-shirt is photographer Hatem Khaled, another Reuters contractor, who can be seen filming the recovery. Then, a second Israeli strike hits the hospital. Khaled, the photographer, was injured. Here is video footage from his camera just before the second blast. Palestinian health officials said at least 15 people, including 4 journalists, were killed in the strikes. In a statement, a Reuters spokesperson said, quote, "We are devastated to learn of the death of Reuters contractor Hussam al-Masri and injuries to another of our contractors, Hatem Khaled, in Israeli strikes on the Nasser hospital in Gaza today."
Just a truly, truly monstrous regime. We know bombing hospitals is Israel's modus operandi, and many Zionists have tried to claim that these were military operation centers for Hamas. Obviously, they lie. But how can they spin their way out of this one? After the first blast, rescuers were wearing bright orange uniforms, went in to check if people were okay, and Israel deliberately hit the hospital again to murder them. Foreign Secretary David Lammy condemns the attack. Horrified by Israel's attack on Nasser Hospital, civilians, healthcare workers, and journalists must be protected. We need an immediate ceasefire. Well, Lammy, we are sick and tired of your bullshit. I don't care about your empty words. You are still selling arms to them. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu came and said this was a tragic mishap, pretending like this was not deliberate. In fact, he's trolling us with his words. I mean, tragic mishap isn't when 20 people are killed. Now, former head of Labour Friends of Israel and current Israeli spokesman tried to justify the murders.
Journalism is a noble profession, but many journalists who have reported from Gaza, so-called journalists, are simply terrorists with a press vest on.
Terrorists with a press vest on. He is such a piece of garbage. But people see through these lies, including Dr. Mimi Saeed, who called Israel out on CNN.
I was just listening to your reporter saying that Netanyahu says this is a tragic mishap. This is absolutely untrue. This is strategic and intentional. The foreign aid workers, the foreign doctors that are actually in the hospital were asked to leave before this airstrike. And so that is not a mishap. That is absolutely deliberate. This is not the first time Israel has struck a hospital. We have this double tap bombing that happened, and on live camera, they hit first responders trying to rescue the casualties. If that's not a war crime, I don't know what is.
Dr. Mimi, can I just ask you, I just want to pick up on what you said. Are you hearing from your contacts on the ground that foreign doctors working at Nasser Hospital were given the heads up to evacuate Nasser Hospital before a strike came?
Absolutely. They were told some arbitrary reason that they had to leave, and they weren't allowed to come back until the next day. So this is not an accident. Israel likes to say every time they strike and break a law that this was an accident. We have seen this repeatedly for the past 2 years. When they killed 15 paramedics and shot their ambulance, they said the same thing, that this was a miscalculation, that this was an accident. This is the same narrative they use every single time they commit a crime, and we just need to see through it now.
I mean, she puts it out there plainly. Absolutely brilliant. They lie, they lie, they lie. This attack was planned thoroughly. It's the last referral hospital in Gaza. Wiping it out is Israel trying to finish off the genocide. This is from the 12th of June. Breaking, Gaza Health Ministry warns Israel's trying to shut down Nasser Hospital. The Palestinian Ministry of Health in Gaza says Israel has notified residents near Nasser Medical Complex that the area is now an evacuation and operation zone, triggering panic among patients and civilians. The ministry accuses Israel of attempting to deliberately take the hospital out of service by bombing surrounding neighborhoods and forcing mass evacuations. Nasser is the only hospital in South Gaza that provides specialized services like dialysis, ICU care, neonatal units, and surgeries. Its collapse, they warn, would result in the deaths of hundreds of patients and trigger a wider humanitarian catastrophe. Officials say this mirrors Israel's earlier destruction of all hospitals in northern Gaza and urge urgent international action to protect the last functioning medical facilities in the south. So you had the mass bombings of the north of Gaza, and they said all Palestinians and Gazans must go down south. It's the only safe area. And of course, they've bombed the south. All northern hospitals have been destroyed, and this looks like the last one they're trying to destroy too. And it's going to create, we say it's going to create a mass humanitarian disaster. It is already a mass humanitarian disaster, which is why I say this is about them finishing off the genocide. They started the genocide. They want to finish it off. Ben, Are you sick and tired of these condemnations when our leaders are not only providing arms to Israel, but also intelligence too? This is not going to end unless our participation stops.
Yes, absolutely. We should be withdrawing. Sorry, my mind is just focused on what an odious little toad David Mensa is. Like, Israel has many supporters and defenders, but I can't help but feel like David Mensa is the Peter Pettigrew of the Israel lobby. Right, he's like that sort of odious little toad that that kind of saps around the center of power, and justifies rather than commits all sorts of horrific crimes, horrific war crimes. In the I think it's in the second Hunger Games film. I can't remember in one of the Hunger Games films. There's a scene where they're trying to underline to the audience how bad the regime is, and so they have a scene where they go out to shoot propaganda, and Katniss goes out with them to do the whole "I'm the Mockingjay" thing. Apologies if you haven't seen the Hunger Games. But the point is one of the most horrific things that they do is they bomb a hospital. Right, that's sort of like the centerpiece of that story. Is like, oh my god, they bombed a hospital. These are the worst people that we can imagine. Right, and this is written sort of back in 2012, filmed back in 2012, and now you've got Israel, a regime which is supported by the West, that just does this on the daily, just again and again and again. What makes this particular strike so horrific and so illegal under the 1949 Geneva Convention is it's what's called a double tap strike. And this is illegal because it's seen as deliberately targeting emergency workers. What they do is they strike, they wait for emergency workers to come in, and then they strike again to maximize the chances that that the people that they struck the first time don't survive. It's called a double tap strike. And of course, it creates a horrific situation and a horrific breakdown of the norms and rules that we need in place in order to protect us. And I think people in the West have an idea that this is never going to impact us. Although that's fine, because there's no way there's ever going to be a war in my country. Think again. Like, we are heading for a situation with the climate crisis right now where resources are getting more and more scarce. And we know, because history tells us, that when resources get more and more scarce, if we don't manage to sort things out and get to a more equitable system, then we're going to start having wars between countries for resources that are becoming more scarce. I don't want to have to do it, but there are going to be wars over water in the future. It's going to happen. Your country might not be involved, but it might. And being in the West, it's not gonna protect you in the future. Like, you have to bear in mind the rules that we lay down now in this conflict. They determine how our police and our military are being trained, because we know that Elbit Systems are working with the government to train British forces. It's going to determine what future conflicts look like that we might be involved with. And if you are called up and you have to be a medic in a future conflict, you do not want the standard rule to be, okay, well, there's a precedent being set now that you can do double tap strikes. So when unarmed medics, rush in, they get blown apart. Like, you don't want to live in that future. Like, nobody does. And the stupidity of Israel, who are already surrounded by warring countries and are losing international support, the stupidity of people like that doing something like this, breaking it down even faster, it's going to hit their doorstep before it hits ours. It's a disaster for the whole world, but it's also a disaster for Israel, because if they set that as a precedent, do you think Saudi Arabia, if it's at war with Israel in the future and has lost the backing of the West, do you honestly think Saudi Arabia won't double tap strike Israel? Like, do you really think that's going to be the case? And the consequences are horrific. One of the victims of this strike was Mariam Abu Dakwa, and I thought she was worth a mention because she was killed in this double tap strike on the hospital. But she seems to, from what I've read, be an all-round good, peaceful person who nobody can say was secretly Hamas. Nobody in their right mind can say that. She donated her kidney to keep her elderly father alive, and she sent her son Gaith away. And she describes her son in the final note that she left to him, because she knew this might happen to her. She described him as her heart and soul in her final note to him. And the bloodied camera is available as a photograph online. She was still holding her camera when the Israeli bombs ripped her apart. And now there's a little boy somewhere in the UAE with no mother, a little boy named Gaith somewhere in the UAE with no mother. And we have to make sure that Starmer, Biden, Trump, Netanyahu, Hotiavelli, Mensa, and all of the others who have Lamy as well, who've facilitated this horrific crime, get held to account for it. Like, it is like our job to make sure not only that we get justice for people like Mariam, but that we protect our future by making sure that we don't live in a world where this is acceptable. Because a world where this is acceptable, I just can't underline it enough, is one where we are all in danger.
I think people forget why we have treaties, why we have rules. You know, from the Second World War, we built the ECHR. We built the idea that we have to have rules, and people have short memories. And now we're seeing it all over again. And we can link this to Nigel Farage, how he wants us to leave the ECHR, the Refugee Convention. You're absolutely right. We are moving into a world where resources are becoming more scarce because of climate change. The same thing that the right wing downplays or outright disbelieves, which is going to create more climate refugees. It's going to create more war. And it's kind of a sad thing to say, war is coming, at least can we play by the rules? Of course, we want to avoid conflict, but if we don't address climate change, it's not going to happen. And you're absolutely right. Countries like Saudi Arabia, they're going to look at Israel and say, well, you break international law all the time. Do you think we're going to go easy on you? It's insane. I think all the people you mentioned and more should be behind bars. Netanyahu, Mensa should be rotting behind bars. And Mensa, to bring him up specifically, comparing him to Peter Pettigrew, the wormtail, you're right. He is such a worm and a rat. Remember, this guy was the head of Labour Friends of Israel. And at the time, unsurprisingly, was calling Jeremy Corbyn and the entire left anti-Semites, who had the gall to say that James Schneider, who was also a Jewish person, but he's an anti-Zionist Jew, said he was a self-hating Jew or he's surrounded by people who hated him. This guy. And how he's supposed to for Israel.
Trope.
Which is an anti-Semitic trope. Yeah. And it's so funny. You can hear a strong British accent when he's trying to defend Israel. Absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. But your words are strong, powerful, but are they enough? Who knows? But we are not going to stop holding Israel and this country to account for the disgusting war crimes that we are participating in. I think that wraps up the stories, but I think we're going to go to our producer for your comments. I know there's going to be a lot of comments. Let's bring in Callum. Callum, how are we doing?
Hello, yeah, I'm not so bad. I just wanted to add a little bit more context to that last story as well before we move on, if I may, which is that many people on the ground have reported that the particular stairwell that was targeted is often used by the very few journalists that are actually on the ground in Gaza in order to get an internet signal, because they've been having a lot of problems with actually getting connected to internet. So they use that stairwell because it's one area in the locality where they can actually get an internet connection, which means they can then send footage back to studios and upload things online and actually get it out to the world. And it's worth mentioning this because this was, as well as it being a blatant attack on a hospital, this was also yet another deliberate attack on journalists. It was a deliberate attack on people who are working their damnedest, despite everything that Israel is throwing at them, to get out the stories of what is actually taking place in there. It's worth mentioning, and Sangeeta Maiska, when Ben interviewed her, said this too, and said that we should never report on what's going on without mentioning this. The fact that Israel do not allow international journalists into Gaza and into Palestine to report on what is going on. We have got to rely on the handful of Palestinian journalists that are already there. And when the IDF know that there is one specific stairwell that they reside on in order to get the best possible internet connection so they can get the news out. To strike it once is a deliberate attack on journalists and a war crime. To strike it twice is even more a war crime and very clearly not an accident. But that's my 2
and
pence
the
worth
thing is,
on
if
that.
we were to list all the war crimes Israel's done, we'd run out of time. We wouldn't.
What
have
gets
enough time
me
to
is that Lamy is very quick to come out and say he condemns it. Well, his words are empty at this point. When Israel have committed a war crime on live television, bear in mind that second strike, because of the first one, that second strike was being filmed and being broadcast live. The footage that we shared earlier from Reuters that had some of that footage of the strike, that was being broadcast out live as it happened. If our government do not take action, if David Lammy does not take action at this stage, I'm sure we've already passed the point of no return anyway. But if they don't take action now, they can never deny complicity, because we have got to the point where not only are these war crimes being committed, they're being committed on live television, and our foreign secretary is saying this is bad. We need to stop fighting. It's like, no, we need to take fucking action, and we need to act now. And to my knowledge, and I might be wrong, please somebody tell me if this is incorrect, but to my knowledge, the government as of now still haven't announced any formal action in response to this attack. I may be wrong, but I've certainly not seen it myself. And I appreciate that Parliament's not sitting at the moment, but if there was ever a reason to recall Parliament, if it needs to be discussed and debated on first, then I think something like this is a good reason to do so. But that's my thoughts. Now let's go to your comments. Specs has gifted 5 turn left memberships. Thank you for that. So we've got Steck, we've got Red P and Party One, Doc, Steve, and Earl. Welcome to the team. And Axamore Crackers has just become a member as well. Our friend Axe, welcome.
Welcome
and,
to the team.
Also gifted 5 turn
thank
left
you.
memberships to others as well. So we've got WC Social, we've got Purple People Eater, we've got Danny Ross. All cats are beautiful, yes they are, and we've got Ro as well. So shout out to all our new members, and a big thank you to everyone there that has been issuing out those memberships. We really appreciate that. Axa said, as a Jewish person with family who fled Israel, the scapegoating and propagandizing of this genocide is being perpetrated by so many world governments. It is sickening and it makes me ill. Thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's when it comes into accusing everyone of anti-Semitism for calling out war crimes, is that you're going to attack Jewish people. I was reading a while ago now, actually, a Middle East Eye article where under Keir Starmer's Labour, you're statistically more likely to be expelled from or suspended from the party if you're Jewish, because obviously there were many Jewish people who were standing up against Israel, and you just think, well, where's your you kicking out anti-Semitism there when a lot of the Zionists are committing anti-Semitic acts? I happen to believe that basically Zionism is very anti-Semitic. It's a far-right ideology of colonialism and ethnic cleansing and or ethnic supremacy. And then there's many Jewish people who know what solidarity is, who are standing against it, and they're being called some disgusting things from Zionists. A lot of Zionists who are not Jewish themselves, they're Christian.
Yeah. Cog?
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to what Axel or Curtis have just said. That's spot
Bro. Yeah, Legal of Deville has said, well, I haven't been keeping up with the news. So good to see that nothing has changed. to coin a phrase.
Labour still suck. Israel still terrorists. Nothing new.
I think it was Theresa May that used to use that phrase all the time, wasn't it? Nothing has changed. This was after she'd lost a massive stonking majority. But nothing has changed. It's
this show, it could have been like 10 seconds long. Nothing's really changed. Bye.
True.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. So thank you for putting up with us through the slog. Is
yes.
What you're saying.
Yeah, definitely. So back to the comments, not in any particular order. I would just so on the whole reform and Nigel Farage, Michael said, I've already seen lives with people saying they don't trust Farage to go far enough, and I think this is a real concern. And it was a really great question, actually, Curtis, that you put to Ben, because we've seen. I was at a protest with UKIP only days ago, and Axe was there as well, and we're seeing people doing literal Nazi salutes in the street, and those people they're not voting Reform UK. They don't think that Nigel Farage is going to go
left
far
wing
enough.
for them.
Although I did hear someone the other day say that in one of my lives on TikTok that he was gonna, he wanted Reform to get elected because he thought that it would be a good step towards electing somebody that's more far right and more extreme. So
I think he's right. Whoever that person was, I think he's right.
Yeah.
I think that's what it is. I think someone put in the chat that Nigel Farage said he was the best sort of medicine for the far right, which is bullshit, right? I think he's going to embolden them even further, because the debate is going to be like the Overton window is going to go even further to the right, and you're going to have debates between Nigel Farage, who's going to be the so-called, and this is going to be the thing, right? We could be in a scenario where Nigel Farage is seen as the left side of the debate, and then you've got Ben Habib, Advance, Restore Britain, who are going to
I think it was Homeland.
I
think it was Homeland that he was hoping would get into power.
Homeland's a neo-Nazi organisation.
Well, exactly, and but that's what he was saying. He was saying he would hope it would pave the way for Homeland, which tells you exactly what his politics are.
Just think how far right. The debate has gone pretty far right as it is, thanks to the Labour Party, right? But now Reform are going to get in, right? Labour are not going to oppose because they'll probably be the second largest party. They won't oppose Reform, and you're going to see people on the extreme far right who are going to help set the narrative, and it's going to be between Reform and the extreme far right. It's a death loop of politics. I'm sorry to say.
If Farage was the answer to the far right, then Keir Starmer would have been the answer to the Conservatives and Reform. But actually, what it is, and let's not pretend that Reform are far right, but just accept his framing for the moment. He doesn't represent the far right. He represent let's say the mid right, midway between the right and the far right. But like, if that logic follows for Farage, if you just accept Farage, then the right will be satisfied.
Oh, 100%.
Then it will, it should work for Keir Starmer. If you vote for Keir Starmer, then because he's imitating Nigel Farage, then it doesn't work like that. As you say, like it just drags you further and further down the rabbit hole, as the red meat just doesn't become enough for the rabid, like obsessive base.
Yeah, I agree.
Chimera's asked, if they give money to the Taliban to take people back, won't the Taliban just send people deliberately for more money?
Quite possibly,
Possibly, yeah.
Which I thought was interesting. Jacqueline said, even if Reform win the next general election, does anyone think that they will win by such a large margin that they will be able to carry out their nefarious policies? I think for me the concern is that they only need a majority. Like it doesn't have to be a particularly large one. And they will be able to get stuff through. The reason that previous governments, where we've had this argument in the past, where well, if they don't win by such a large margin, they're going to struggle to get things through, is because a lot of the other political parties, to steal a phrase from Labour, are what these parties call a broad church. And you've got people like, up until recently, you had Zara Sultana as a member of the Labour Party until they suspended her, and you've got people that will rebel against the party. I don't think we're going to see that within Reform. I think if Reform get, certainly not if they're wanting to pass policies like what Nigel Farage is talking about. Even if they have a majority of one, I think they'll get it passed.
I mean, you also have to think about the fact that there's going to be no meaningful opposition to it. So it doesn't matter if they have a majority of 10 or 100, because you're not going to get the Labour Party who are going to try their best to frustrate the Reform Party. They'll try and frustrate them on governing and competency. They're not going to be there to draw big ideological differences, which I think is going to make it very easy for reform. Labour are going to act in opposition as they're acting now by turning around and looking at reforms policies of deporting 600,000 people by saying it's unworkable. We can't work, rather than saying this is disgusting and fascist. So I expect to see that in opposition, which is going to make it easy for reform, because there's not going to be an attempt to try and swing the debate back towards the centre.
Yeah.
I think just an answer to Jacqueline's question, even if they don't have a large enough margin to carry out their plans, it still puts us in a really dangerous situation, because then they've got an incentive to look for ways to say that, oh, well, now we need ways to bypass Parliament, so we need to give more power to the executive branch of the government. I think, and they'll always be blaming the other parties in Parliament. We'd be able to deal with the migration crisis if we weren't being blocked by all these liberals and lefties,
straight
and
out of the Trump
Greens,
book, basically.
It's essentially straight out of the Trump book. And so it's a disaster, no matter how you paint it. The only answer is real pushback, real tough pushback against them. That's how you're going to have to do it.
Speaking of the Trump playbook, Knopfels said, being tried in the US, what a mess, expensive, inhumane camps, innocents round up, people pushed into black markets for work, kids targeted at churches. I wonder if councils can declare sanctuary.
We did see, I don't know if it was a term of phrase for people, but at the protest in Liverpool, people were calling Liverpool a sanctuary city because obviously they're a bit more progressive. But I wonder if there are actually ways of doing this. It's not written in our political system, I don't think, unless I'm wrong.
So Liverpool is actually a city of sanctuary.
It is.
Which is part of a movement of. There's a number of places across the UK that are classed as that, and it's awarded to for communities who support and do a lot of work for people seeking sanctuary, and asylum seekers, refugees. But it's more of a it's sort of awarded through charitable organisations rather than it's recognised by government, but it's not like an official.
Okay.
It's not from. It doesn't come from government.
That's interesting to learn, though. Whether it's effective is different, I suppose, but.
But of course it's difficult to be a city of sanctuary when the far right come out and march on the streets, which is obviously why so many in Liverpool came out to oppose them.
Absolutely, and that's why you got to counter protest them every single time.
And it was 2 counter protests, by the way, just to clarify. So I was there just interviewing people, and there was the stand up to racism protest, and there was also another protest of the the name's completely gone. What are they called? Are the anarchists? That's the word I'm looking for. They all came out in force as well. They had a separate group of them that were sort of stood separately from the other counter protests. And it meant that when UKIP were trying to march through the city to try and get to the women's hospital, which is at the other side of the town, the other side of the city, they weren't able to, because they had one group on one side of them, one group on the other, and the best that they could do was just do one circle around St George's Hall, which was the meeting point basically for the rally. Liverpool will always stand up against far right and fascism in whatever form it takes, whether it's the EDL, whether it's the BNP, whether it's the National Front, whether it's UKIP. So. Yeah, I think that they need to start learning the lessons about going to Liverpool. I'm just aware of time, so we'll probably wrap up. But just quickly before we do, we've got a comment from Specs. Curtis is better dressed than Bastani.
Well, thank you. No, not that it's a competition, by the way. Right? No shade at our friends at Navarra, but I'm going to take that compliment.
And Rachel's asked, this was following Cog's comments about his mum. Was Ben Cog a red diaper baby?
Yeah, I was thoroughly indoctrinated by my parents. So there's a photo of my aunt being arrested in the background of a photo of Jeremy Corbyn. So like this history goes
Nice.
back, you know. We're a family that's always
We
been
salute
kind of
her.
like.
Well,
Yeah.
unfortunately, and I'm sure there'll be some in the comments that won't be surprised when I say this, but my mum sent me to World Book Day at school dressed as our then Prime Minister Tony Blair. So I went in with a red tie and a.
Was this pre-Iraq or post-Iraq?
I feel like it might have been during.
Sure.
I
Wow.
went in with a red tie, a little briefcase, and
blood on your hands.
talcum powder in my hair to grey it a little bit. So it was after it started going grey. So.
And no blood on your hands, no?
No, surprisingly. But
I thought you were going to say she sent you in dressed as Thatcher or something.
Oh God, no, never in the household I grew up in. Definitely not Thatcher.
Christ.
But
That's
anyway,
abuse. That's child abuse.
and on that note, thank you for having me, and great show as always.
Thank you so much, Callum, for your comments. Thank you so much, Ben, for being a wonderful guest. And of course, thank you to everyone in the audience. You've always been amazing, and I love our community. But of course, that is all we have time for. So thank you again to our viewers who tuned in. And remember, please, to like this stream. And if you're not a subscriber, then hit that button. Again, if you want us to grow, then you can head over to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. There is a link to our Patreon where you can support us monthly, or follow the other link to give us a one-time contribution. Alternatively, you could become a YouTube member for just 99p. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.
Support independent media. Support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you. Turn left.